So hello everyone again. My name is Avel Espiritu. I'm with Red 5 and I'll be facilitating the Lean Coffee session today. Some housekeeping. Again, I will be muting everyone during the presentation. Don't forget to unmute yourself when we go into the Q&A period. And as well, if you can't attend the entire session, I will be recording this and I'll be sharing the YouTube channel later. And you can watch it at your convenience at a different time. So I'm part of a community of volunteers that runs the Edmonton Lean Community of Practice, also known as Lean-YEG. We host a Lean Coffee session on the third Friday of every month from September through June from 9 a.m. to 10 a.m. Sometimes we're doing it virtually, sometimes we're doing it in person. And at these events, Lean practitioners meet to discuss and learn about our favorite topic, which is Lean practice in our community. Sometimes we have a structured, agenda-less, yet fun, laughter-filled conversation on Lean. However, today is a presentation from one of our local practitioners who's going to be sharing their Lean journey. So today's Lean practitioner is a Lean Green Belt. She's also a process manager with Ideal Contract Services. And while practicing Lean, she faced a challenge in her process, which we'll affectionately call the Kraken. Not only did she tame that Kraken, she developed a new learning paradigm as she went on what I call her amazing A3 adventure. So it is with my pleasure to present to the Edmonton Lean Community of Practice your speaker for today, Sara Becker. On to you, Sara.
Hi, good morning. Thanks, Avel. This is exciting and also super fun because I got to look back on a big project that I worked on about 6 months ago. So it was like revisiting my own story, which was really entertaining. So I'm really excited to share it with you guys. But in this, I decided to not just, go through my A3 and show you, what happened or what was discovered, but also share the actual journey with you, because it was at times perilous. And I think that's pretty beneficial for anybody who wants to try an A3, to know what you're getting yourself into, and to know that, yeah, there's going to be some pain and it's okay. At the end, it'll all be worth it. So the other side of this too, part of this slide, is I've got Red 5 there at the bottom. Just got a shout out to Avel. He was our Lean guru throughout our A3 process. There were about 5 of us, and he had to deal with 10 p.m. text messages the night before a session where we're all losing our effing minds and, crying to him, telling him that we're failures. And so thank you, Val. My A3 is your A3.
Yeah, no worries. I'm just a mirror, Sara. Just a mirror.
So for those of you who don't know, this is what A3 actually looks like. It's an 11 by 17 piece of paper named for that. And it's kind of a roadmap for how to kind of look at a process that you have and delve deeper than you normally would and try to find some root causes, real root causes, unbiased, explore some solutions or potential solutions, and kind of scientifically test their effectiveness to see if they are actually going to, give you the results that you're hoping to get. All of it is very scientific, I would say, or it's supposed to be, and it ends up that way in the end. But what's surprising is how ridiculously difficult that actually is. The most important part of an A3 is that it involves going to a bunch of other people and, getting feedback from them and being vulnerable in front of them. And that part is not easy. That's probably the most difficult part of the journey. Like even in my role, there were some people that I would not have chosen to include in my A3, but were stakeholders. It was really essential that they were included. But I had literal panic attacks about going to talk to them. So this is kind of what the A3 journey actually looks like in pirate map format. So when we started, Avel sat us down in our super ugly boardroom and asked us a really simple question. what's wrong and what do we want to change. So the other guys were, really deep in contemplation. It took them a while. A couple of them even changed their minds with their A3 over their own journeys, because finding that worthy thing that you want to change or you want to improve is, I think, very difficult for a lot of people because they feel that there's so many things wrong. So picking one and dedicating so much time and energy towards that one thing, it has to matter, right? But for me, I mean, it wasn't even a question. It was an immediate guttural response that payroll sucks and I wanted to work on payroll. There's a few reasons for this. So my organization is still pretty old school. Our captains of the ship were 75 years old and have some old school methodology. So every 2 weeks, I would write at least 250 checks, physical checks. My company, Ideal, if you guys don't know, we do steel stud, drywall, insulation, taping, paint. We do residential, commercial. Residential also has a service division. We do multifamily wood walk-ups. We now have a spray foam and blown division. So when you think about the enormity of the amount of people I pay every 2 weeks, it's redonkulous. We pay people on payroll. We pay them sub-hourly. So that's a subcontractor that's still having time tracked. And then we pay piecework. So piecework invoices are each per house or per building that people work in. So sometimes a contractor will have 3 piecework invoices. Sometimes they'll have 20. Those all have to be combined. Like, I'm honestly tiring myself out just talking about it. It's a gong show, and it's, like I said, every 2 weeks. It's all in 5 days. It's insane. Like sometimes even 4 days when we've got a stat holiday or something. So all of the time cards that we had have to be approved by foremen or supervisors in the field. All of those invoices have to be QC'd by supervisors and invoices. Some of those invoices have holdbacks, like I said, some do not. And then once all of this is said and done, each one of those individual checks has to be signed. It has to be physically stuffed into an envelope with the backup of what we paid them so that they can see what we paid them. And then they have to be either hand delivered to site or picked up. Yeah, it's a big process. And for me, payroll is not everything that I do. I do a lot of other things. Like, I manage all of the safety at Ideal, which is a huge beast. A few years ago, I created our HR systems, so I run all of that. I do a lot of other accounting for our company. I kind of handle, the higher end of all of our training. I help mentor our apprentices and our apprentice mentors. I do a lot of the marketing for Ideal and event planning, which can be time consuming. And I provide project support. So if any of our foremen, managers, project managers are ever having problems, that's my jam. My favorite thing ever is solving problems for people. But losing a week every 2 weeks is not okay when these are all of the areas that I want to focus on. And when you've got that whole week disruption and at the end of it, there's still mistakes, it's devastating. It's painful. It's like you're not even sure you want to come in the following Monday. And it's not just painful for me, and it's not just painful for the other admins. It's painful for our project managers, our foremen who are making mistakes, and especially it's painful for the workers who are getting a check that's wrong. And then they have that discomfort of having to say, listen, man, you shorted me. Like, what did I do wrong? So all of that is really a beast, and the reason why it was so easy for me to think, yeah, I want to change this. I need this to be better, and not just for me, but for everybody else. So this is kind of my first, or one of my first iterations of once I, established what my problem was, to try to communicate it in the simplest way to all of the stakeholders involved. I needed to get them interested in what I was trying to do and make them care, So, I created this visual, and looking at this path, it's supposed to be a river / waterfall, right? And you're supposed to be chugging along and feeling wonderful. And at the end of the day, you want to be in a very sweet, serene lake where you can just like kayak away your problems. But instead, this is what it felt like. So, we'd get started during the week and we'd be all ambitious, and then boom, we have to stop everything we're doing and we have to wait because somebody has to review. And then the next day you've got more to do, and then there's problems from the previous day that you have to fix, and all of that is time consuming, and then boom, you've got another friggin' review. And then the next day, like, it just kept going on and on throughout the week. And like, you see my little shark fins and alligator, that's all the bullshit that I had to deal with, of people coming in, oh, I've got a late invoice, or oh, I missed this person's hours, or oh, I forgot that this person even works for us and we have to set them up. So seeing this path, I think, was easy for a lot of people to feel that pain and go, yep, I agree, I feel that too. And the most important thing was that gong show, the Kraken. I don't think it was difficult for anybody to see that and imagine that feeling on the Friday and feel that it is accurate. So this is what I used in conversation with our stakeholders to get them interested in making any kind of changes for this. But it opened up a lot of emotions from our stakeholders. There was a lot of blame, not just blaming themselves, but blaming others for problems in our process. There was tons of shame. Anytime, somebody made a mistake, they felt like they weren't doing their job properly. There was fear. There was so much fear that some people wouldn't want to change, that we're making all this effort for no reason. That was a big fear of mine. And there was a lot of dread, I think, especially for, some of our more seasoned stakeholders, that they would have to change and that things would be different. And, change is uncomfortable. So there was, too many feelings about this, but that was the moment that I knew this A3 was worthy. And I knew that it would be worthy for other people, not just myself. That Friday hell was tangible, and it was something that everybody could get behind. So that's where I moved forward. So I took that path, the messed up, horrible, full of fun animals that want to murder you path, and mapped out with feedback from other people just how much time we were spending on this process. And getting these hours figured out was kind of mind-boggling. That we spend so much time every single day on this process that's a completely non-value added process. We are paying people because obviously we have to and we want to. It's fair to pay somebody for doing work for you, but we're not getting paid for that. The company isn't getting paid for that. It's just an additional process that we have to go through. So why is it costing us $5,200 every 2 weeks? That's $10,000 a month that we're spending on physically writing checks. Oh, and little note on there. The other thing that really sucks about this whole process is payroll Fridays, I could never take a day off. Every second week, I could never take a day off. And I still can't take a 2-week-long vacation because of payroll, but I can take a 1.5 week vacation now because payroll is shorter. So this is kind of what I used to explain to people, first off, what we were doing. And that first sentence there was truly the thesis of the entire A3. You know, payroll is all-consuming, disruptive, and stressful. And I referred back to that constantly, showing people that, you know, when we pay people, it shouldn't feel like a freaking volcano is exploding. It should feel like unicorns. We should be happy to pay our people. So looking at our current situation, that was, you know, what I'd mapped out, what we were spending every day. And the ideal situation is what I would like to be spending every day. And the point of that was to give time for value added or non-value added but necessary things that I wanted to work on. I'd love to have a day off. That'd be awesome. I'd love to leave early on a Friday and go have a beer like a normal person, you know. I was unable to. I'd love to work more on budgeting. I'd love to work more on expanding our business, on marketing, on spending time with our humans. You know, that HR division that I created, that wasn't all for nothing. You know, the safety that I do, spending time on site, you know, coaching, it's all really beneficial. So for me, this was huge. And for our guys, you know, if they are spending the entire week on payroll, they can't do their physical jobs and they can't work on mentorship and they can't, you know, prepare to make their lives easier. So they can't spend an hour, you know, figuring out what material they need to get for the next 2 weeks. They don't have that time because they're busy dealing with friggin' payroll deficiencies. So with feedback from those people, we set a target. And this was what, you know, our group and those stakeholders thought was reasonable to create change. So 13 payrolls, which is half the year. We wanted to get down to 45 hours from that 132. Instead of spending $5,200 or $5,300 every 2 weeks, we wanted to spend $1,800. And that meant doing 7 less hours each payroll with less than 3 mistakes. And that was really important to me because those mistakes were the Friday Gong Show. So if we were bringing down our deficiencies and also our hours at the same time, then that would be a win. The question then was, how do we get there? And that is the whole point to this scientific method, is I can't be the only one finding solutions because I'm biased. I have only one tiny small part to play in this whole payroll gong show. And there are other people who do have a huge part to play. So we got solutions from all of our stakeholders. Some of them were great. Some of them were unreasonable. Some of them were outright dumb. There were a couple that were super dumb that I didn't even include on the list, mainly because I didn't want to embarrass them. But, you know, I encouraged those ideas to come out anyway because they fueled some really good discussion. And getting these solutions was really bonding experience, I thought. Because, like I said, everybody's in the trenches together. We all feel the pain. And this was exploring potential, you know, so it's exciting. So what we did with that is I then got everybody to vote on which solutions they thought would be the most effective or the most likely to create long-standing change. And that gave me an idea of where or what solutions I should really start focusing on moving forward. So that's what happened. I mapped out those potential countermeasures, those potential solutions in 4 categories. So what was, you know, pretty easy to do, what we could maybe do, what made no difference if we did it or not, or what were big old nopes. And as you can see on the right there, those were our top 5. So that I ended up using as our solutions, right? Those 5 that we had voted on. At this point, I stopped kind of being super fun and drawing all the time because there's just so much data. So I created a schedule for those 13 payrolls, and I did it in Excel so that I could keep, you know, formulas to make all of the math easier. So I could track our hours properly. So I could track our happiness level. You see the little happy Kraken. and, you know, average things out and see how we were sitting. Also, I kept a running log beneath this schedule in the same Excel spreadsheet of, you know, what the notes were every 2 weeks. So what actually happened with each of the 5 solutions that we'd picked, whether something was effective or not, what questions to ask people, what we could do to change things moving forward. At one point, though, I had an absolute crisis. All of these changes that I was implementing completely reverted. We had a record payroll, so we had 70 more checks than usual. It was super duper busy. And all of the growing pains from the 3 check runs that we'd done previously meant literally nothing to anybody, because that moment where everything was falling down on their heads, they were like, okay, well, let's go back to the way we did things before, because we knew that at least worked. I mean, technically it didn't frickin' work, but you know, it's what's familiar. So that's what people did. So, you know, our piecework reverted, and it was reviewed prior to check writing. Even payroll was reviewed prior to check writing. So all of those reviews on that path that I had just taken away went back, which was horrible. You know, we weren't rejecting invoices that weren't good. We kept digitizing things unnecessarily, and everything was out of sequence. We had like 20 mistakes. It was brutal. And at that point, like, I felt like a friggin' failure. Like, I'm excited about change, and yet nobody else is on board. Like, that was devastating. And I think that was the moment that I was, you know, texting Avel late at night being like, what do I do? I don't know how to make this better. And I think this moment is really important for anyone attempting an A3 to see, is because this, I think, is where most initiatives die. You feel this failure and you think, okay, well, this didn't work. Instead of thinking, okay, this didn't work this time. I have to keep pushing, and I have to keep working on this, and I have to reevaluate whether these solutions are the right ones, or if maybe there's a different approach to trying these solutions, which is the scientific way of looking at it, taking those emotions out and looking at the process again through, you know, unbiased eyes. So I decided to move forward like a goddamn scientist. In that moment, you know, all I wanted to do was blame people for taking the easy way out. But honestly, at the end of the day, it has nothing to do with the people. It's about the process. People know what they need to do. They want to go home feeling proud of the work they did. People care. People try. People are, you know, they're not trying to sabotage you. Or at least like 99.99% of the time, they're not trying to sabotage you. It's about the process, and it's about the science. So I went back to the root cause. Now, this root cause was established earlier on in my A3. And again, it was from feedback from all those stakeholders. You know, we looked at all of the different elements of payroll. So, you know, we were lacking standards. We were using frickin' paper. We were over-checking everything. There's a lot of travel, overburden. There's deadlines. We needed physical time to write all those checks. But the biggest one was manpower was misplaced. So we had an overburden. There was a complete lack of time for field review, way too much administrative review. There was a bunch of variation in how we did things, and the deadlines were insane. You know, on that Monday, we had to have everything ready to go by a certain time so that somebody could review it. And that person reviewing it was not in the field, so they don't even know if it's correct. So them spending all that time on it makes absolutely no sense. And that was what I got from the foreman. And this was when I started talking more to foremen who were in that front end of the process, and the project managers too, to see what exactly they needed in order to do the essential review that they needed to do to avoid all of that admin review and avoid defects. So you know, talking to them, getting their feedback, pushing for that admin review to stop, that went back to how we were on our path to begin with. So that shitty payroll, that everything went terrible and, you know, I wanted to basically kill myself, that it was like it didn't exist. You know, the hours continued to go down and things continued to get better. This is what it ended up looking like in the end. Those solutions that I was telling you about, those were mapped out. We did those. There were a couple that I extended, which you'll see with like the little dotted lines. And I extended those because they weren't fully implemented by the date that I wanted them to be, and I thought it was really important because it was showing really good movement in the right direction. So those were extended, and yeah, this is what it ended up looking like. So I mapped out the hours that we went down, and you know, every payroll I would get feedback from everybody how much time they saved. But I also got feedback every 2 weeks on people's happiness level. And you can see actually in that third payroll, the happiness level was a 2. That's legit. And there were a couple that weren't super great either. There was one where a little later down, we, you know, gained some hours, but it still didn't feel great. And there were probably defects that time. So I think it was really important to gauge that happiness level and find, you know, the process itself to be in a position where that happiness level is sustainable and those hours are sustainable. And when you see at the end there, you know, 33, 33, 33, 10, 9, 9, it started to really feel that way. Like this was a process that was repeatable, that we could continue doing and continue feeling that success. So this is in the end, the super exciting part that I love to show our owners, you know, the people who are invested in our business, that we saved, you know, ridiculous amount of time. We saved like 100 hours just about. We saved $4,000 of payroll. Like we exceeded our goal by quite a bit. And that translates to $104,000 saved per year. Now, to clarify, though, that's not money, you know, in our pocket, and one of our owners still has difficulty understanding this concept. That $104,000 goes towards time being better spent on other things. So, like for myself, you know, that week where I spent the entire week on payroll, I then, after that point, had time, right? So this was a long haul. This was more than 6 months of my life, and everybody was involved. So we definitely celebrated our success. We usually drink scotch together when, you know, we get a new contract, and that's always super fun. But I don't generally get the contract, so I don't generally get to have my successes celebrated in the same way. But this mattered to everybody, so we had a really good little cheers there. And this is kind of the plus delta that happened after everything was completed. So this is sort of what I saw, or my feelings about the process, and, you know, of doing an A3, the wins and losses, right? So looking at the pluses, you know, investment in success was really awesome. That review versus verify for administrators had the absolute biggest impact, and spoiler alert, I'm using that same concept in my current A3, my new A3. People are seeing improvements impersonally now, you know, where we were all feeling that blame, shame, whatever. We actually almost came to fisticuffs at points in our boardroom because there's so much involved and there's so much invested in this. So people were taking a lot of things personally, and by the end of the process, they stopped, and it became about the process itself for everyone. A couple deltas. Direct deposit is still not done, and here we are 6 months later, and it is still not done. But there's light on the horizon. It's going to happen soon. Like I told you, you know, when I was explaining that schedule, I had to extend a couple processes because there were some rough patches, and I really needed that hands-on with our foreman. Initially, getting buy-in was super difficult. It was like pulling teeth, and managing feelings, like I said, coming to brawl, you know, that was rough. But some surprising wins company-wide was communication improved big time, and not just within payroll, but all over. Having those time savings made even, you know, the work that our foremen are doing better. You know, they only have to spend time on payroll on Monday. The rest of the week is their own. Again, there's that huge money saved. Our stakeholders were so invested in this, and they're still invested in this. And we actually formed some habits, which I think is probably the biggest one of all. You know, an A3 essentially is about creating lasting change. So that happened here, and that I think I'm the most proud of. So that's my A3. He just traveled my journey. I'm incredibly happy to have it completed, and to see the sustainability. You know, we've been sort of in the back of our minds tracking, not hours saved or, you know, anything like this, and it's not in a spreadsheet or anything like that, but we're sort of tracking like how many defects we're seeing every payroll, and that's sort of a measure of success. Every payroll is whether we're still doing well. And from the last like 15 payrolls, we've had total 15 payrolls total less than 5 defects. Nothing but happiness. Hours are about the same, so it's been kind of beautiful. But another a little tidbit about the journey and myself is, after all of this happened, and once we had all this time saved, and you know, everybody was happy and things were wonderful, and you know, people were skipping around the maypole, personally, I had my own crisis. I had no idea what to do with my time. And again, like at the very beginning, you know, I said like it's difficult for people to see what's worthy of doing an A3. I felt very much like, what's worthy of this time that I saved? What should I actually be spending my time on? What's value add? And it was an existential crisis that lasted about 3 weeks. And then I got down into it and, you know, pick the things that matter most to me, and I've been moving forward with those. So that was temporary, and we're back on track. And just because I love you all so much, here's a sneak peek at my current A3. I'm not very far along yet, and I haven't updated this in a couple months because I've been kind of tracking it separately like I did with my last A3. But this is the beginning and middle of the next one, and there's a lot of similarities between the two, so it's been very interesting. You know, part of the A3 process that I love is, again, sustainability, so I'm using that first A3 as a diving board to continue doing A3s and to try to make this into a habit. And we're trying that with our Lean Green group too, to get everybody to continue doing A3s. You know, not mandatory or anything like that, but encouraging it. So if we see something that's wrong that could be fixed, it's like, why don't you A3 that? And that's where we are moving forward. Happy Kraken. So yeah, that's all I've got. I'm open for any questions.
Thank you, Sara. Sara, for sharing with Lean-YEG, your A3, and even your new one as well too, because the month-end invoicing is definitely going to affect capital. Sorry, that was really loud. So my key takeaway is that you use the A3 as a tool to communicate with your team and get their buy-in and collaboration on facing and resolving the challenge of payroll. But what a huge de-stressor it was, not only for yourself, but for your entire team when the payroll process was optimized like you did it. And, you know, kind of funny, like how long you just were that first picture where you're like everything's fine and everything's kind of burning around around you, and how long you existed like that, and you just didn't know what you didn't know, right?
Yeah.
I even remember when you first started this, you're like, okay, we need direct deposits. That's going to solve all my problems.
Yeah.
You
And
haven't
we're
even
still not
got there
even
yet.
there yet. Yeah. Well,
Um,
that was a common bias for most people, is they all thought, technology solves all of our problems, right? But it truly doesn't. It'll be nice to have when we eventually get it, but is it the real win here? No, not at all.
yeah, it's much more intrinsic than that. So before we get into questions and answers, our next Lean Coffee is Friday, November 18th. So everyone who's here, if you like this chat and you like to continue, November 18th, put the save the date on your calendar. If you want to see what we're going to be talking about, go to our LinkedIn page, and I'll put the chat there, and you can be current on all the different stuff that we have on the go for our Lean community of practice. And as well too, you can go to our YouTube channel and you can watch the recording for this video and recordings for other videos that we made that that we had some really good presentations on that you can peruse through. Okay. Now, I'll get into the Q&A. You can post questions in the chat or use the raise hand feature. And don't forget to unmute yourself. And if you guys have some questions about Sara and her amazing A3, now's the time to use the raise hand feature, and we'll cycle through all the questions. All right, Karen, you're the first one up. You have a question for Sara? And you're muted.
Yes, thank you. First of all, that was a fantastic presentation. I loved all the drawings. Those were great. Yeah, they so completely told the story, so that was really neat. My question was about like this transformation affected people like at sort of different levels in the company. And I'm just wondering, like the people who might have been a bit more removed, like people not in the office, but maybe the foreman and even, I don't know if people sort of below that were part of that. How much did they know about the overall big picture of the project versus, just saying, okay, now we're standardizing invoices, but that's all they knew, let's say. So I'm just curious about how much they knew about the really big picture and whether that made a difference to their buy-in as to why they wanted to change, or, why they were willing to participate in this change.
Yeah, good question. Yeah, in the beginning of the A3 process, when I needed to get feedback on, the potential solutions and things like that, I went direct to those foremen and shared my A3 with them. And I continuously shared my A3 with them over the entire course of it, because I wanted to share in our wins whenever we had them, right? Because that's a big deal for them. They get to feel that success as well. I didn't really share it with workers. I felt like they were quite removed, and for them, the only real feeling they had was on that Friday. They felt whether their check was correct or not, and that's really it, right? But having the foreman bought in and having them give feedback, they felt that ownership of what they were doing and what they were changing. And so, yeah, they knew really in depth what it was. The workers, not so much. And I don't regret that, honestly. I think that was probably the right thing to do. If that answers.
Okay.
Yeah, no, that answers. It makes a lot of sense.
Perfect. The next person up is Corey Benbow. Welcome to the community, Corey. You have a question for Sara on her A3?
Yeah, so just a couple, I guess a comment and a question. So really interesting to see technology being the hypothesized panacea, but ending up not being. And I'm just kind of curious what your, if you were to say like one big low tech solution that you thought was way more impactful than you guys initially thought. And then the second one is a little bit more on the moving forward as well. But considering this problem is very defect focused, did you guys ever think about failure modes and effects analysis at all in terms of like really identifying those causes and what mitigation strategies you could use?
Well, for your second question, I don't know what that is. So that would be a negatory. What was your first question again? Sorry.
What was
the
low tech,
the
most surprising low tech solution that you guys?
Well, zero tech was taking review away from administrators. That was number one. And again, it felt so easy in the beginning to blame and to say, this person is just a control freak and that's why they want to look at every single friggin' piece of paper in our company. And that's not what it was. It was that they were seeing all the defects. And so they thought, how can I eliminate these defects? I need to look at everything and I need to fix it, right? Without thinking that maybe you're not the best person to do that. Maybe it's these people in the field that need to do that. So just taking away the blame and then taking away that review from them and letting them still verify, because it's important. Their verification was absolutely necessary, but for a totally different thing. They're verifying that, that money is correct, that if there's any money we have to take off a check, that's happening, that, if this person owes CRA money, we're dealing with that. That was their job. The actual tangible review of the hours and the footages and whatever, that's the guys in the field. And they need to be allowed to do that and they need the space to do it. So that was the biggest and most surprising effective change that we had. And zero tech. It was just taking shit away from someone.
Awesome. And FEMA as a failure modes effects analysis, we didn't go into that one yet, but didn't have to go into that deep of a level. There was so much stuff going on with just low tech stuff that we didn't have to kind of go into. It was more like talking about the communication and stuff like that. The next person who had a question was Mike. Mike, you're up.
Yeah, so my question comes into, it's like, okay, first off, fantastic presentation. Fantastic presentation. I was riveted from the start, from the Kraken all the way through.
Wow.
So my question comes into sort of time. It's like you've got so much that you're doing. How much of this did you take home with you and do after hours? It's like, by looking at how much you're doing, there's definitely, it seems like there's more than 40 hours of work being done in a week. So
Are you referring to the A3 or to my actual work?
Well, to the A3, because it seems like that was sort of added on to your work as a method to control your work. Well,
so the A3 itself, yes, it took time, but I'll clarify, I guess, that there's a huge misconception that doing an A3 or doing any kind of lean work is going to take a bunch of your time that you need to actually do your job. It's bullshit. Like I even have some people in my company who, were set up to start lean green training and they refused because they were too busy, and I just wanted to smack them upside the face because, like, yes, it does take time, but it's not as much time as you think. It's conversations that you should already be having. A lot of the time they're conversations that you are already having, but they're just guided in a certain way because of all that buy-in, right? When you're getting that feedback from stakeholders, you have to have those conversations. And you're standing around the frickin' water cooler anyway. So let's not talk about hockey, and instead let's talk about this process and what we can do to change it. The pictures that I made, like the A3, funny enough, that's probably, I think there were 50, honestly, different versions of that A3 because Avel would make me redraw it every 2 weeks like a dick.
Oh yeah, when she busted up the nice pictures, I was like, you're gonna better get an eraser because you're gonna erase it all. And
yeah.
she did.
Yeah. that was time consuming at home for sure. I didn't use my regular work day to do that. But you know, Netflix, I would just draw and like get caught up on some super sweet documentaries. So, I mean, it didn't feel like I was wasting time at all. If that answers your question.
Yes, it answers the question. It kind of elaborates and weeds into it is that Lean is part of the work and not separated from it. And so it makes me rethink a lot of what was said in the presentation from a perspective of time. So thank you.
Cool. Yeah.
Awesome. And you know, not everyone's A3 have to be like fantastic pictures. A lot of them can just be, you know, stick figures. If you can draw a stick person, you can do an A3.
Matt, we have one. One of our guys did an A3 on taping QC, and he did a stick figure of this guy that has an appendage attached to his knee, and is the funniest. Oh my God, like every time I look at it, I want to cry because anatomically it makes no sense, but it's so good.
Yeah, that's the after hours A3 if you guys ever want to see that one. But yeah, he was trying to express how knee jerk of a reaction it is to screw around all the time.
And did that aptly.
Yeah, you use stick figures. Yeah. Okay, next person up is Trina. Trina, your question.
Awesome. Well, thank you very much, Sarah. I appreciate the comment that we don't have to be able to draw to do these, because I have been laughed out of rooms for my drawings. My stick figures are that entertaining sometimes. However, my question for you is really getting back to the A3 and how did that drive your process and decision making? Like, did you actually use the flow of the A3 or how did you use the flow of the A3?
That's an interesting question. You know, like that pirate map that I showed you in the beginning of, you know, going back and forth throughout the A3, that was accurate. You know, Avel started us on, it seemed like a bit of a linear path, but in order to make an A3 like a full story that makes sense from beginning to end, you have to go back and forth and revisit. And you know, even when you're making change and you're trying things, you have to go back and look at what you did previously and maybe just like tweak it. You know, maybe in my explanation of the problem, you know, while I'm in my actual trial period, you know, that schedule, that Gantt chart, maybe I have to go back to breaking down the problem and change those hours, which I did have to do because they were inaccurate. You know, I had them way lower than what they actually were. And once I got even more feedback from people, I had to tax them on. So it wasn't linear at all. It was all over the place all the time. And that's the fun part.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah.
The other thing as well too, everyone's A3 starts with words, and when you go to people that stakeholder here, I want to come watch my A3, and they got to read that. You get these blank stares, and they're not going to. It's just noise, and no one's going to read it. They're just go You can get head nods. So if you use pictures, the uglier pictures the better. So Trina, you're A-okay there. If it can solicit a comment and engage them, it's perfect. But before you
seriously haven't seen my drawing of L.
Oh, trust me, I've seen many A3s, and I always force them towards pictures. No one's going to sit there and do what Sarah did and bust out the crayons and really go crazy on it. Some people do. I do tell them don't start that because you're going to erase it, and I won't feel sad about it because I'm just used to just destroying stuff. But
you're so mean.
But the thing is, though, is that start off with words, bomb a whole bunch of words on, and then after you've talked, you've kind of morphed around, see if there's some things that I can take as a picture as a stick figure, as a graph even. And when you engage the psychology of it, when you engage the other side of the brain, right? Because you're the scientific thinking, you're thinking very analytically one type of thought, but then you try to make it on the creative side, you start to engage like both sides of your brain, so to speak, and things will just start to happen. People go like, well, what type of pictures do you draw? I don't know. Just start free drawing stuff and then kind of disengage, and then it'll just appear, right? Magically. If it doesn't work, just keep going. And it's seriously, these pictures will just kind of morph and they'll kind of take their own form. And then you have a really good A3 that when you go to someone, now they're like, hey, that's a cool picture. And they'll ask a question. What does that mean? Like, what is that appendage on that person's knee? Like, what is that? And then you talk about it, right? And then you hooked them. And that's how you get their engagement and their involvement in the problem identification and then the problem solving of it as well too. Are there any more questions for Sarah and her A3? All right. Again, thank you, Sarah, for sharing your A3 journey with the Lean Community Practice. Again, I will be posting this on the YouTube, so if you wanted to watch it further, go ahead and join our next Lean Coffee, which is on November 18th. And I hope to see you all, and stay warm. Bye, everyone.
Thanks for listening.
Thank you, Sarah. This was great.
Good job, Sarah.
Thanks.